So the King's Fund is currently doing some work around supporting leaders around AI enabled change. And so it's brilliant that we've got you all here today to be able to explore some of the questions that perhaps are really live for you as leaders. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, if you're honest about where you see AI and leadership right now, what comes up for you? What are you thinking about?
I think boards are going to have to sharpen their pencils really around AI literacy and fluency. Do we really understand what goes on inside some of these models? Do we know those that are really good and rigorous and well constructed on good sound data, well trained, I think is the phrase, versus those that aren't? And the reason I think it's important is, if we're going to have some form of internal regulation in an organization, which I suggest we do need to have, even if that is, quite a lot of self-regulation by clinicians who are implementing these sorts of things, I think it's hard to do that. It's hard to gain assurance that we're doing that really, really well, unless we've got a much better level of understanding than we currently do.
Jordan?
I think for me, I speak from the other side, trying to build that confidence with our board and get that trust from them in the things that we do. We're a very small charity. We are tech first, so that's a very different starting point. Even our team members that aren't the tech people are surrounded by tech every day and in everything that they do. So for us, a priority is to build that trusted, safe culture where we know all that we can experiment within the boundaries of all of our policies, within the boundaries of regular education, pre-trained models, skills that are pre-programmed and supportive in kind of getting where the staff member needs to go. So for us, we've always known tech is the only way to get where we want to go, which is to support every carer in the UK with a break once a year. And so we work with very simple traffic lights where it's very clear to everyone in the team what they can and can't experiment with. We evaluate it, check it if it worked, and build that confidence for them to experiment, even though we don't have the capacity always to do very fancy big AI projects. Every project that we do need to immediately provide and create a return, and everyone knows that excites everyone, it empowers everyone. And as long as we as leaders provide that safe environment where experimentation is accepted, almost expected, that in our experience brings good results.
It's honest reflections of AI leadership. I think we're behind. AI leadership is everyone's responsibility. Is coming into our lives, and AI in healthcare is involved in admin, in diagnosis, and clinical decision support as well. And I think the leadership is behind in that. And you see this across the country. There is some areas that adopt AI very well, and then some areas that you think are probably the best equipped to adopt AI haven't adopted it. And it's mainly because lack of understanding. And I think leaders in the future, just as leaders have this reverse mentoring, you probably have reverse mentoring on your board as well, that should be with AI as well. They should be going out to the front lines, seeing how AI works, equip themselves with understanding, right? And then that way, they'll be able to make decisions and assess risks better. I think at a point, the kind of knee-jerk reaction is that it's too risky, we don't understand, rather not. And I think we're gonna see it's gonna move beyond that, but it needs to happen a little faster.
So very much around kind of the leader's role in imagining what's possible, some of those guardrails that I guess was being talked about earlier. So in addition to the kind of practical challenges, I just wanted to ask you a question around, I guess, the kind of emotional feeling element of some of this, which I think is often in the space but doesn't get talked about. What do you think is required in order for us to be able to kind of support that kind of emotional response to change, the emotional response to how transformational AI is in relation to the workplace? What do you think is required?
I think it's really important that our dialogue is about the practical problems that people are wrestling with and trying to resolve. and how those, if they're resolved, will do something or produce something better for patients, which is fundamentally, you know, from sitting in an NHS trust, that's what we're there to do. I think if we make it all about technology, I think it becomes quite frightening. It becomes quite frightening because, as Osama said, not everybody gets it. And then there's this sort of unstated threats, I suppose, in this, which they're coming for my job. You know, it'll replace humans and all of these things. Whereas I think if we're clear about the problem we're trying to solve, why it's valuable, what good looks like at the back end of that, and then you can have a conversation about the technology that best gets you to go in that direction. That feels to me, Mark, where the rational and the relational start to jut up against each other and rub along happily in that sense.
I think it's one that we don't pay anything like enough attention to on how does this feel for people who are at the sharp and pointy end of this.
Joey, for you, from your perspective,
It's definitely around transparency. There is lots of fear around AI because it's so hard to understand, and even the smartest people in the room earlier will struggle to really explain how AI and large language models work. So how can we expect our beneficiaries of the charity to understand how this? So really being proactive about this is AI generated, trying to create safety around the tools that we're building for them, where they feel looked after, they feel like we're holding their hands wherever we can, by over communicating how things are happening, how stuff is processed, what we ask, what we don't ask, what we try to, what we store, what we don't store, how stuff is processed in simple, understandable terms that relate to people's everyday lives. That really builds trust, and that allows them to give it a go. And often what we're seeing now, after some failed attempts in the past, but AI, because we are now able to train the model so much better and give it so much data to help the user, the beneficiary on the other side, to get to the point where we want them to get to, the results speak for themselves. And just kind of making that step a little bit lower for the users to take by over communicating what's happening, kind of gets the ball rolling.
I've only been a doctor for 6 years, okay? But it feels like every time in the NHS, there's always change, and it's always transforming, and there's a lot of emotions about people not willing to want to change, and if something's not broken, don't fix it. And there's a lot of emotions I can tell that's involved in that as well. And I come back to both of what you said, is the technology solving the clinical problem? Does change need to happen as well? And that's the emotion there, is that if it's not broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. And also it's about transparency on what Joey was talking about, and it's about being honest about what the technology is actually doing, how it works as well. The reason why people early in their careers, they're not used to this constant change, and they're willing to take on AI and try new things. But for others, the old systems always worked for them. Why do they need AI? And I think that's important. And there's a lot of emotive things there about it's always worked in the past. Now I have to learn how to do things differently. Am I going to work as well? Is it going to work as well for my patients and the staff as well? And I think it's understanding that as well.
But I think there might be another dimension to the emotional aspect of this, which is it's not just about the change that's taken place in the stuff you come to work to do, but people also are concerned about social, ethical and moral impact of what's possible, I suppose. And I think again that's something that is pretty easy to underestimate. It's in a way where people's sort of broader social values come into play in the workplace, and I think there's something about AI that challenges people sort of in that respect. So so it's probably, it's only just dawned on me actually that this is probably part of the conundrum in making sure that we land these things really well, is to be prepared to listen to those other elements of people's concerns.
Do you know, that's very interesting. A lot of people, we talk about AI, but no one talks about, well, we're talking about greener NHS and we talk about net zero and everything. No one's talked about how much energy AI uses. I think I was in one workshop and somebody just blurted it out. Oh, AI uses this much energy, how much water is used. And I was taken aback. And only then I started thinking, all this technology, but the NHS is trying to move to net zero. Is this going to push us back? And I'll be aware of how much the ethical implications of using AI. And are patients aware? I don't think we are aware.
In my mind, I'm very interested in the big companies that run these language models, and there's a huge moral element to how each of these big players operate. And there is at the moment not one player that strongly prioritize, maybe except for one, safety and ethical decisions, and that doesn't come up at all. And I really think there are these two extremes with AI, which is, one is this utopia where AI fixes everything and finds a cure for cancer and all of that, and there's this other extreme which kind of represents the end of the world, and if AI is used in a bad way. And a lot of the big players have leaned into the utopian version to get funding, and there's a couple that are now starting to make a stance where they're in between and we acknowledge both sides. And yeah, I feel that's a huge other kind of bubble or a consideration that will become more and more relevant the faster and the harder and the more that we go into that full AI direction.
What do you think is difficult for leaders to be able to say openly right now about adopting AI fully? Are there some taboos there? Are there some things which are difficult to kind of share?
I don't think it's difficult to share, but I don't think we've got enough environments where we're able to prompt leaders to say, do you know, there's a lot of this I don't understand. I find myself constantly searching for the sort of right language to use with people who may be unfamiliar with it. If you explain it or attempt to explain longer term strategy of AI to a patient forum, you know, it's a classic challenge to this of it's an evolving, forever changing sort of entity in a way, because the principle is it learns, you know, it changes, it evolves. And that's a hard thing for people to come to terms with when, you know, your leadership and management disciplines tend to be all around predictable things.
In medicine, we have this thing, right? The worst type of clinician is the one that doesn't know that they don't know, right? Yeah, because they're more dangerous like that, right? But and I think it's about being honest what we don't know, and I think it's being honest to patients, because there's a lot about AI, and as this evolves and the more we adapt, we don't know. I think it's about building governance structures that is dynamic, not a policy that gets updated every 5 years. But it's also about being honest with us and being as honest with our patients, with our staff, is that we don't know fully, because anyone can do a pilot on an AI tool that comes in. The pilot is only small. When you expand it, right, that's when you find out if there's any issues that come in. The benefits have to outweigh any harms produced, and we all know that. But the honest truth is, it's like when I see a patient in GP practice, for example, if I'm honest about what I don't know and I explain to the patient my thinking process, they're more comfortable. We need to be transparent about this is a whole new world for us. We're exploring this. We see the benefits. However, we are taking it slow and we're trying to learn.
Something that keeps coming up in my mind is, and I haven't heard about it today, or you don't hear that much about it yet. I think it will be very soon, is the cost and the actual finances around it. It's everyone was AI is going to replace staff, and everyone's scared to lose their jobs and efficiencies, and it's much cheaper to deploy AI. But I feel like I know that we're getting to a stage where the pioneer models that are able to take over very clever bits of what us humans do, not everything, not by far, but the big parts, they're becoming so expensive and so resource heavy that I think it's something that I'm starting to think about within our charity, with more limited resources than what you guys have been talking about. But there is a shift where our AI spend has gone up significantly. We don't immediately have grants or specific funds that we can draw from. It's currently coming from my tech line. So as long as the outcome and the deliverables from AI is still higher than what the cost is, everything's fine. But it's creeping up. And yesterday I did a small project. An agent was running for half an hour, and it was £150 for that half an hour session. And for me, that's a big chunk of our budget.
I just wondered, what advice would you give to anybody else that's going to need to navigate this, that perhaps is at an earlier stage or feels less familiar with perhaps how you need to get your head around it? What would you say to them? What have you learned that perhaps might help them orientate themselves?
Oh, I don't think there are too many stupid questions in this area. Just ask the questions. It goes back to thinking about what's the question we're trying to ask, the problem we're trying to solve, the future decision that we're trying to make. And I think we're sort of guided by that. You can then ask your technology questions with a bit more precision. I mean, there's a really simple one. Does that thing that everybody says we should buy and, do the job for this? So the answer is no. Then we should go back and ask some more questions, as opposed to almost, in a sense, take a reassurance approach, whereas as long as some clever people say yes, they must be okay. Been there before.
I'm trying to look at what helped us to get to where we are now, and I think don't skip leg day. So I'm focusing on getting the infrastructure right, and that's a very unglamorous thing. It's not very exciting, but making sure that the infrastructure is there and thought about. And it's difficult because lots of people have different opinions and different approaches, but making sure that the team has everything that they need, that they feel safe, that environment of transparency and trust is there. That's what sets everything off, because it allows people to experiment, go back and forth, push something out, see if it works. If not, pull it back in and iterate and keep doing that circle.
I couldn't agree more with what they both said. So definitely ask the right questions, definitely infrastructure, but it's also building your own capability, right? And start small. Play with AI yourself in your own environment. See what it does. See the hallucinations. See what it gets right. See what it gets wrong. Learn how to prompt. Very basic skill. We should all learn how to prompt. Learn the different types of AI that is used. Dude, can I answer your question? Do you find, because when we do AI literacy, we do very basic workshops, and I tend to find the older consultants come in. Do you think there's a sense of people who are so esteemed in their career, they find it a bit more difficult to ask these questions because they're supposed to be the experts and academics and, the top guys and girls and everything, right? What's your view on that?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think there are lots of people who are driven by a really strong sense of curiosity, and they'll already know because they've been on YouTube, they've done the things you've talked about. They're absolutely consummate professionals, so many of them, and they will have seen it as part of the professional duty to be on top of this. But I'm absolutely certain there are also lots of people who are thinking, I should be more conversant in this. I should know, where the pitfalls are and so on.
So thanks for your time. A really interesting, in-depth conversation, which is it's definitely got me thinking about all these issues in relation to AI and leadership. And thanks for watching, everybody. And look out for some of the work that we're going to be doing in this space over the next weeks and months. Thank you.